Hello. So, my name is Seb. I used to use this channel to upload tutorial videos on 3D modeling. I used these, that was a long time ago, but I used to do this at the very start just to sort of share what I learned as I learned 3D myself. So if I learned, some tip or trick, I'd just make a video of it and throw it up there, and then eventually I do like longer series content. And as I got better at 3D, all the videos advanced, got longer and longer and more complex, and eventually they stopped happening because they took up a lot of time, and I had school and stuff and whatever. So, but that's not what I want to talk to you today. Today I want to talk about some things I learned as a 3D artist in AAA game development. So for the last 3 years, I was a 3D artist at DICE here in Stockholm, which is the makers of Battlefield, the Battlefield series, also recently the Battlefront series, and Mirror's Edge and other side projects like that. So it's a very big company, and I was a 3D artist on Star Wars Battlefront 1, and up until the very last DLC pack, where I was a weapons artist as well. And for Star Wars Battlefront 2, I was a full-on weapons artist. I was an entire project, I just made weapons. I was one of the 2 in-house artists we had working on weapons. So these were very big projects. Multiple hundreds of people, for better or worse, worked on those projects. And it was quite an experience. I think it's about as big as it gets. I mean, I assume so. I mean, it's all I have for experience, but those were very big projects. In these years, I learned a lot, and I think these are things you don't really get to learn, or you don't know to look for lessons on them if you're just doing personal work. At least I didn't. I definitely did not. I remember when I first got I started as an intern. When I first got in as an intern, I just had no idea what to expect. I mean, I'd seen all these behind the scenes videos of game developers before in my life, since I was very interested in that stuff, but it didn't really paint the entire picture of what it was like to actually work at something like that. Yeah, I didn't know what to expect, and I sort of went in head first, and it was a huge learning experience. The entire process, really, it never stopped. I was learning new things, and I was hoping to share some of those lessons with you today, because I think it could help. I mean, it definitely helped me, that's all I know. As an artist, I feel like I got a lot out of that experience, and hopefully maybe I can share some of that knowledge to you who, maybe doesn't work in AAA game dev, because this applies to, just being an artist in general. So let's try and get into some tips and tricks here. So one of the first things I remember learning, getting used to was, and that's one of the major things I think is very important, is to be prepared to, well, maybe not prepared to, but basically you got to be ready to work very hard and to work in rapid succession, because there's no break when you're in game dev. You make one thing, you finish that thing, and then you make another. You can just get it's the big queue of things, and when I was doing just personal stuff, I'd take these pretty long breaks in between projects, because the projects were pretty big, and I spent a lot of time on them. But so I'd finish that. I'd worked very intensely on that project, but then after that I'd take a pretty long break until the next one. So before I got into this, I was pretty used to that formula. I mean, obviously if I'd thought about it, I might have suspected it wouldn't be like that in actual, in the actual industry, but it was still something I wasn't used to. So it came as a bit of a shock at just how much, because I mean, what you're making is you're still trying to do your best, so you're putting a lot of work into this one thing, and often it's a big thing, but then when you finish with that, you feel like you just want to take a breather, but there's no real time to take a breather. You got to keep working hard, and it might sound like a bad thing, and it might sound very hard, and sure, it could be hard, but the thing it does, which is something I noticed, is it teaches you a lot about a lot of different things. So one, it teaches, due to the scope of it, because you're making so many different things as a 3D artist, you learn a lot of different you learn a lot about a lot of different facets of 3D modeling and 3D texturing and all that, because it's never like each object always is very different, even if they're very similar by the look of it. They're often very different, because say you're making 2 different props of the same type, like a chair and like a lamp or something, right? They're the same rough size, and they're going to be in the same environment, so they look pretty similar. So the chair might be the thing you start from first, so that's pretty straightforward, right? It's just a chair, it's a static thing. So you do that one way, and then you maybe learn how to optimize that thing good and well. And then you move on to the lamp. It's very similar, but then you realize you have to make, you have to have an emissive texture or an emissive shader on there to make it glow. You have to do all these different things, right, to the lamp, and you just start learning all these different things that you might never have done otherwise, just due to how many different things you have to do. And obviously, that's if they're very similar. Usually, the things are actually very different. Like, I remember one of the first things I did was a big modular pipe system where every piece, it was these massive pipes for Star Wars Battlefront 1, and each piece had to fit together like Lego blocks, because the level artists had to use them in the levels, and that would be the easiest for them. And I'd never done anything like that before, so I had to learn how to do that. And oh yeah, for that one, everything had to share one texture, so all the different pipe systems had one 2K texture that they went off of. So that was a lot of different things that I'd never done before, and that taught me a lot. And it's stuff like that you started learning from doing, from just not taking really any breaks between models. Obviously, I'm not advocating doing that all the time for personal stuff, but I think it's actually very good to do that, even if you're not actually working as a 3D artist. But if you're just doing it as a hobby, it teaches you a lot. So maybe, I mean, there are these things, right, when you make one model a day or something like that. That's sort of the idea. But I was never that into the one model a day thing, because it sort of implies you should rush them almost. I like taking my time with stuff, so I think you just doing a lot of modeling. It sounds kind of obvious, but doing it a lot and a lot of different things, it helps you so much. It's actually crazy, and that was the first thing I noticed for sure. So another thing that was important for me to learn was to know when a model is finished, which is maybe sounds a bit odd, but basically, I think any artist of any kind can relate to this. When, you can spend years and, you can spend ages polishing up anything, right, in order to make it look perfect in your eyes. And basically, when you're making a model, right, or making anything, I guess, but in this case, yes, making a 3D model, the growth of how good it looks compared to the time, right? I mean, we had a graph of this at work. That's why I'm using this. I'm sort of picturing the graph. It's sort of a steady slope. It goes upwards. It looks, the more time you spend on it, the better it looks, and it goes steadily upwards. But eventually, you hit like a plateau, a soft cap, if you will. And after that point, the amount of time it takes to increase its good lookness, and for lack of a better term, increases substantially. Like, eventually it looks about as good as it's gonna look, except for like 10%. And then that 10%, if you were to get it to that point where those 10% were done, that would take way longer than anything you've done previously. And in AAA, what you learn is that you should identify when you hit that soft cap and then just be happy with it. Because wasting a lot of time getting those final few bits perfect is not really super important. And overall, I think that's actually a good thing to do in personal work as well, almost. I mean, you can spend a bit more time there, but I think you're not really learning too much from perfecting something, I feel, at least. And at least for me, 3D is always about learning new things. So I always want to improve as I'm doing stuff. And I generally, I think, I'm pretty fast when it comes to the 3D stuff, but I did find myself I did try and get things perfect a bit too much. Even when I was working, I never quite got that lesson, but I think it does help you a lot if you manage to identify that soft cap and can maybe ramp it off before you spend months doing something that doesn't actually help the thing too much anyway, and instead just move on to something else. So another thing that I remember stood out to me when I first started was the importance of tech meshes in game development. So this is very unexciting, but it's something they don't really teach you, and you don't really ever have to bother with when you're just doing personal work, because unless you're making a game. If you're making a game, you have to deal with at least some of this. But if you're not, and I sure as hell wasn't before I started, you never have to worry about it. So no one ever talks about it. So what are tech meshes? So these are things to optimize your 3D model for a video game. So you can't just throw make a game model, UV map it and make a texture for it and then throw it in. If you do that for all the models in a video game, the video game's going to be very laggy and the performance is going to be terrible. So what you have to do is you have to make tech meshes which help the game optimize it and run smoothly. So what are these tech meshes, right? Well, there are, at least this is for, we used Frostbite at DICE, and they still obviously do. This is what we had. Most of this, I think, is fairly universal. I'm pretty sure, I know for a fact that Unity and Unreal have some of these, maybe not all, but some of them definitely. So what we had to do was, and what you have to do, this you have to do in all engines, you have to do LOD steps, which is level of detail steps. So what are these? Well, they're basically different versions of the same model that gradually decrease in try count, and then will load as the player gets further and closer to the model itself, in order to preserve performance. So if a model is very far away, it doesn't have as many tries as it does close. Just, you know, that's classic optimization, and it's the cause of you know, the popping you see in some games, and that's the level of detail stages not being, you know, correctly made. What we used to, as a rule, was we used to half the try count each step down to a baseline of 200 tries. What this resulted in was about usually like 4 or 5 LOD steps, which was 4 or 5 different versions of the same model, and each one you had to do by hand. Well, we had automation tools for it, but they were never quite as good as doing it by hand, so I always just did it by hand. Eventually you do get quite good at it, and it does speed up, but it was time consuming for sure. That's almost the most important one to get right. Then you had collision meshes, which are also very important. They determine where the player can collide. I mean, it's pretty obvious by the name, but what the player can collide with on the model or not. These were built up of, for Frostbite, they were built up of sort of primitive, sort of, you shaped into the shape of the model, and yeah, basically it was a different thing. They don't require UVs or anything, but they were a different skill set for sure, and something you had to practice to get good at. Then after that you had raycast meshes, which were, they determined what part of the, like how bullets bounce off of the model, like what parts collide with the bullets and what parts you can shoot through. That was a different mesh. And then you had enlightened meshes. Now these, I'm pretty sure, are almost exclusive to Frostbite. I don't know if they are and other stuff, but they were basically handled sort of how the light bakes on the model eventually when you start rendering out everything. And they were sort of a hassle because they were very complex UV wise, but I think that might have just been a Frostbite thing. Then there were also occluder meshes, which were basically like you could put a plane inside a model, just like a flat 2D plane, and everything behind that plane would be occluded, so they would just straight up wouldn't render. So if you had like a big building, you could put a occluded plane inside of it, and then everything behind that plane that would be blocked by the building, so the players wouldn't see it anyway, that would just stop rendering entirely. So that was a different type of mesh. It might have been some other meshes that I didn't think of, but it was all these different things. And what it resulted in was basically I'd spent like what I do for an entire project on a personal piece would only amount to about half of the work on an actual like work model, because the optimization would take about 50% of the process. So it would be 50% making the model look good and look right, and then 50% optimizing it and making it work correctly, which maybe to some wasn't the most exciting, but it's very important to learn, and it's something that at least to me was never actually taught. Like, I'm mostly being self-taught, so maybe if you take a class, I mean I took a few classes, but maybe if you take a class like an extended period, like actual education, maybe they mention this stuff, but I was never taught it. And I think it's something that's pretty important to at least, I mean, if you're looking to get into AAA or game dev in general, you'll probably want to know this stuff. And it probably is good to practice at least a bit. And I'm kind of feeling like I should make a video on covering sort of how to make these things, because it's not exciting, but it is vital for making things work correctly, at least in larger scale games. Another thing I learned that was very important was to understand the importance of working as a group when you're making a game. Basically, as a 3D artist, at least to me, when I just did personal stuff, it was very easy for me to get snowed into something and just sort of shut everything else out and just focus on my thing. And this isn't exactly possible when you're, I mean, it's possible, but it's not really what you want to do when you're doing like these big projects. You really need to work with other people and check what other people need, because usually there are people doing like the level designers or the level artists, which were in our case were the ones who actually took the 3D art and placed them in the levels and designed all that stuff. and you had to work. I had to work very closely with them on certain things to make them fit properly, to make them work properly. You have to have the pivot in the right places to make them be able to place it correctly. Basically, it's just a lot of these things that you have to do in order to make the best possible thing you can. Because at the end of the day, you're not only making this model for yourself anymore, you're making it to build upon this existing big thing, and that a lot of people are working on. So you have to work with the people close to it. And not only just like the people placing, you have to work. It's good to always ask for feedback, because at least the experience I had at DICE was that everyone, all the artists at DICE are insanely talented. Everyone's so good. So if you ever wanted feedback from anyone, they give really good, concise feedback, and it's very important to check for that stuff. And I think no matter what scale you're working on, if you're working with any other people on a game project, you'll start to realize how important it is to work together as a group. I did a course before I started DICE where we did a couple of game projects. I think one was 2 weeks, one was 4 weeks, and then the other one was a bit longer than that afterwards. And each one of these really taught you how to, they were very small scale. We were only 4 people in a group or something like that, but they really taught you how important it is to work together to get something done. And it's something that, it's hard to practice on your own, but it's something that at least be prepared for it, right, when you're getting into something like this, because it's something that is vital, I would say, to getting good results. And I think I'll cut it off there. I've sort of rambled on for long enough already. There's a lot of other things I could go on and on about this, but I had a very interesting time in AAA, a very good time. I really enjoyed it, and it taught me a lot as an artist and as a person, and it's just, I'm very happy I did it, and I would recommend it. I think it's a different type of thing from just doing your own work and stuff like that, but it's cool. It's different. But yeah, hopefully some of these tips maybe helped you a bit, or at least caught your interest. I don't know, it's not the most instructional thing, it's not going to instantly make you a better artist, but it's just I'm just sharing my tales of my experiences, and hopefully some of it resonates. So yeah, I'll maybe try and make some more videos for this channel at some point. I have some time in my hands, so who knows, something may go up at some point, and that'll be great. So yes, thank you for watching.